I'm Dwight Drummond. Tonight, all eyes on the U.S. for a historic presidential election.
I think we're going to have a great night. We're going to have a great night, and we're going to have, much more importantly, we're going to have a great 4 years.
We're going to have more people vote this year than any time in American history.
We will bring you live to both Trump and Biden headquarters and find out how Americans here in Toronto are feeling about the big night. Plus,
we will stay on top of the trends to determine where regions stand.
from stages to tiers, Ontario is changing how it will open up and shut down different regions. We break down the new color-coded rules and
They're recommending that you consider a 3-layer non-medical mask, which includes a middle filter layer.
Canada's top doctors update their recommendations for the type of mask you should be wearing to keep yourself and others the most safe against COVID-19. It is election day in the USA, a divided country set to choose the direction it will take over the next 4 years. Whether they stick with Donald Trump or go with Joe Biden, it is a pivotal moment for the country, one that will also impact Canada and the rest of the world.
No, I'm not thinking about concession speech or acceptance speech yet. Hopefully, we'll be only doing one of those two. And you know, winning is easy. Losing is never easy. Not for me, it's not.
His voice hoarse from campaigning, the president doing a tour of the Republican campaign offices this afternoon. Talking with the media, the president saying, as he has for weeks, that America is rounding the corner on COVID-19. Now, there have been concerns about violence and possible foreign interference in today's vote. So far, just one report of problems. The FBI is said to be investigating robocalls across the country that have been attempting to prevent people from voting.
I promise you this. Although I'm running as a proud Democrat, if you elect me, I'm going to be an American president. There's going to be no red states or blue states, just the United States of America.
Joe Biden making his final pitch to voters this afternoon in Philadelphia. The first polls are closing as we speak. The last polls to close will be in Alaska at 1 a.m. Eastern Time. This election is expected to set new records for voter turnout. It's estimated that more than 100 million Americans have already cast a ballot in early voting. Paul Hunter is covering the Trump campaign. He joins us live tonight from Washington. Looks like he's right outside the White House. Paul, you've been covering Donald Trump since he became president. And talk about what the atmosphere is like there at the White House tonight.
Well, you know, I don't know how many times I've said this in the past 4 years, Dwight, but I mean, I've never seen anything like it. The atmosphere is one of not knowing what's going to happen, right? And it is one of, you know, are we going to have a new president at the end of the night? Are we going to have a re-elected president at the end of the night? Or are we going to have a kind of civil war in this country? Because if Donald Trump doesn't win tonight, might he try to claim that he won? Might he say the Democrats have stolen it from us? And how will people respond if they hear that? You know, around the White House, this is supposed to be a night of sort of a celebration of democracy in this country. We are inside, like, I've never seen the place so fortified as it is tonight. There are like 3 layers of barriers that you have to get through to get in here. On Black Lives Matter Plaza, you can kind of hear the demonstrators even now gathering. They've got a giant watch party going there. Who knows how people will react if Donald Trump decides to contest the election. So the atmosphere is anticipatory, but nobody quite knows what they are anticipating because nobody knows how Donald Trump is going to react to whatever the results are that make it in tonight.
We know you are fenced in there in the White House. One of the messages throughout this campaign for Donald Trump has been that votes shouldn't be counted after today. What does this tell you about the president's strategy then, Paul?
Well, notwithstanding, you know, he hasn't said what he'll say. He has certainly been suggesting that he'll push back hard if in a particular state, Pennsylvania, things don't go his way. And what do you mean, if I can unpack that just a little bit. You hear a lot about the early mail-in ballots that have been happening through the roof, right? Record amounts of mail-in ballots. They'll be counted in Pennsylvania after tonight. It'll take a while. The expectation is that that favors Democrats. So the results tonight might look like they favor Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, but over the next few days, as the mail-in ballots are counted, they may turn back to Joe Biden. That's what Donald Trump wants to push back against. He's got a team of lawyers lined up to take that potentially to the Supreme Court. They say this may be like, Bush versus Gore in 2000, but on steroids. Donald Trump is suggesting he won't leave Pennsylvania aside, a critical state in that all-important electoral college. He won't let that go without a fight.
As we watch you and the CBC team across the U.S. tonight, Paul, what are some of the key things we should be watching for?
Those battleground states. Forget all the rest. If you want a tip, Dwight, just watch these states: Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona. Any one of those, right? Those are the only states you have to watch. Donald Trump needs to basically, take them all in order to win. Look at it this way. In any other election, we would be looking at the numbers that Biden has in his favor right now, nationally and in most of those battleground states. And we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be having a conversation about what is a Biden presidency going to achieve? What's it going to do? What's it going to look like? Instead, because 2016, when Donald Trump threaded that needle last time, people wonder, will he do it again this time? But he has to do well in all those states. Lose any one of those states, and this is Biden's. So that's what I'm going to be watching, just the battlegrounds.
CBC's Paul Hunter joining us live from Washington, right outside the White House tonight. Thank you, Paul. A 2-hour drive northeast of Washington on the I-95 gets you to Wilmington, Delaware. That's where the Biden campaign is watching things unfold tonight. It's also where we find our Susan Ormiston. Susan, how did Joe Biden spend the day?
Well, unusually, he was pretty busy. He was up at 7:30 here in Wilmington. He went to Mass. He went to visit his son Beau's grave. Beau apparently was the son who told him to run a third time. He's tried twice before. And then he was off to Pennsylvania down the highway. He wants that state. It was part of the so-called blue wall for the Democrats until 2016 when Trump broke through, and he's desperate for that state. They both are, really. So he was to Scranton, his hometown where he lived till about 4th grade. And he wanted also to reach out again to white working class voters in that area of Pennsylvania around Scranton. And I guess for a good luck charm and some memories, he went back to his childhood home. And we have a little bit of that to show you. And Dwight, what's remarkable about that scene is how unscripted it was. There were actually, dozens, maybe a few hundred people in the streets trying to crane, to see Joe Biden, to get close to him. This has been a very scripted, controlled campaign, these drive-in rallies, invitation only. So it felt much more like a campaign at the very end of it, Dwight.
Currently no mistakes allowed there. National opponent has shown a clear lead for Joe Biden, but when you look at some of the state-by-state races, Susan, things are much closer. What is the Biden campaign likely most concerned about right now?
Well, you heard Paul list off those battleground states, so those are the same for Joe Biden. They're worried about Florida. Why? Because it's got 29 electoral seats. It's a big win, and they were late to the game there. There was some shifts in the support in Florida, and they didn't address it soon enough, according to many watchers, and some of the Latinos in Florida may have shifted. Now, Joe Biden was doing better amongst seniors in Florida, but they're worried about that state. Donald Trump has to win Florida. If he does, it doesn't mean the end for Joe Biden. It just means a different path and a harder path tonight, Dwight.
So what are the main things we should be watching for tonight, Susan, on the Democratic side?
Well, watch those battleground states, watch the turnout, watch how quickly those votes are counted, and we are expecting that if there is some kind of a decision tonight, that Joe Biden will come out here to a stage stage in the parking lot in Wilmington and address the nation. He did say today that if there's something to say, he'll say it. If not, he'll wait till all the ballots are counted. But we were told earlier by his campaign that he may have something to share with us tonight. He did say in remarks today on the trail in Pennsylvania that they were feeling very good about the turnout, overwhelming turnout of African American voters, particularly in Georgia and Florida, seniors. He said that things are looking good for the base that supports me, so seemed relatively confident today.
See that building behind you all lit up in Democrat blue for tonight. CBC's Susan Ormondson joining us live from Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you, Susan.
Okay.
We will have special live programming for you on what could be a very long U.S. presidential election night. The Nationals' Adrian Arsenault, Andrew Chang, and Ian Hannah-Mansing start at 8 p.m. anchoring our CBC News reporters like Susan and Paul on the ground in the states that matter. That will be followed by a CBC News special after the vote. That starts at midnight. And at 3 a.m., our CBC Morning Live team will be on the air. You can find it all on CBC News Network. There are thousands of Americans living here in the GTA. Many of them will be taking part in virtual viewing parties tonight. Chris Glover joins us live from the U.S. Consulate on University Avenue. And Chris, in the 2016 election, you covered a big viewing party at the Gladstone Hotel for us. Of course, a very different scene tonight.
Certainly a completely different scene, just me out in the cold, you know, by myself, and it's really too bad too, because when you talk to, I remember that party, and I remember how much excitement was in that room and how much anticipation there was, and when you speak with American voters this time around, it certainly sounds like that same kind of anticipation and certainly excitement is also there tonight, but they're not going to be able to do it in a big party because of COVID-19. Instead, they'll have to do it at home and perhaps online, trying to build communities that way. Even in Canada, American election night is normally quite the party.
Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you fine. Yeah, Zoom doesn't always work perfectly. Technology, right?
Absolutely.
Does that make you nervous about tonight?
Just a little bit, but I think it's good to at least have some way to be around other people during the election.
Massachusetts voter Hannah Bruce is teaming up with other U of T students to host a virtual panel discussion and results viewing party tonight. How many do you think will be from America like yourself, and how many do you think will just be interested Canadians?
I actually think the minority will be American. I think a lot of interested Canadians and non-Canadians have found this election to be pretty thrilling, if not always for good reasons.
Democrats abroad have about 600 people in Canada signed up to join them virtually tonight. Organizer Diana English sent her ballot for Biden to New York a month ago. With more than 620,000 American expats, Canada has more U.S. voters than any other country outside America.
We can be the margin of victory in key states. For example, in 2016, President Trump won Michigan by fewer than 11,000 votes. We're quite sure that there are that many Democratic votes in Michigan in Canada.
And what's that other sign behind you?
That, ta-da!
From his home in Hamilton, David Mavasser spent the day reminding Democrats to vote in his home state of Pennsylvania. Is this how all of these elections have gone for you as an American voter living in Canada, or is this one unique?
There's never been anything like this. I feel like the choices are so stark.
Did you vote in this election?
I did. I got my little sticker going on here too.
Oh, I can't see it. Okay. Mark Feigenbaum thinks the choice is stark too, with Trump the obvious pick. But the chairman of Republican Overseas Canada doesn't know of a pro-Trump party in the GTA tonight.
In Canada, it might be hard to find. There's clearly more Democrats than Republicans, but there's a number of us that maybe we're just shy.
Democrats like Hannah Bruce, much more visible, but this election night, she says she's ditching her swag.
Last time around, I was decked out in full Hillary merch, and that didn't go so well.
And another sign of the time sort of thing, Dwight, is Hannah cast her ballot, and she actually voted by email instead of a mail-in ballot. She also certainly wanted to vote ahead of time, very excited to vote. And one of the points that she kept making was that the decisions and the policies that, in her case, Donald Trump is making in the States do not stop at the border. So that was what motivated her to get out to vote. But certainly all of those voters that I spoke to shared that same kind of urgency in getting their vote and having their voice heard, even if they're here in the GTA. And I'll just leave you with this one thought, and that is that of those 620,000 American voters living here in Canada, they certainly have the potential to have quite an impact in the States. But in the 2016 election, only about 5% of them voted. So if they were to get out and vote in bigger numbers this time, they might have an even bigger impact, right?
Yeah, I think we're guessing the numbers are going to be higher this election because they have been so far. Thank you for that, Chris.
Thanks.
To Ottawa now, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says she has spoken with the Canadian ambassador in Washington and that Canada is prepared for all eventualities. The Prime Minister was asked about the U.S. election today and what considerations he would make before phoning the winner with his congratulations.
I think many people will be watching the elections tonight. I will certainly watch part of them, but we also know that there is a possibility that we won't know results until tomorrow morning or even later in the week or even longer than that. That is something that has happened before in terms of American elections. Many of us remember the 2000 elections that took a number of weeks before determining who would be sworn in January. We're going to continue to, watch and make sure we're standing up for Canadian interests every step of the way. But we will allow the American elections, obviously, to unfold as they will, and Canada will watch.
The Prime Minister adds the window of opportunity to turn around COVID-19 is closing fast, and the country's top doctor is offering some new advice on ways to slow down the disease. David Cochrane has the latest guidance on something we've all had to get used to: masks.
Winter is coming, seemingly already here for many parts of Canada. And as people start to bundle up, new advice on what to wear on your face.
To improve the level of protection that can be provided by non-medical masks or face coverings, we are recommending that you consider a 3-layer non-medical mask, which includes a middle filter layer.
A 3-layer mask with a proper fit to cover the mouth and the nose. The 3rd layer in the middle, a fabric strong enough to act as a filter, flexible enough so you can breathe easily.
Well, it will increase different ways of catching droplets of different sizes. So, it may not filter everything, but a well-fitted non-medical mask will filter a lot of the different droplets of different sizes.
There are instructions on the federal government's website so people can make their own or know what to buy. New guidance as COVID cases reach new levels across the country.
Right now, this virus is being given the chance to spread. It's being given the opportunity to grow. I know that's hard to hear, but the numbers are showing us that our window to turn this around is closing fast.
Closing fast as the virus rages in the United States and as many European countries go back into lockdown. The new mask guidance isn't just because cases are surging, it's that increasingly cold weather means we will be increasingly indoors, in closer contact, at greater risk of infection. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
Ontario is launching a new system for COVID-19 restrictions. It puts each public health unit into a color-coded level of risk from the virus. And already some doctors say the prevention measures are still too weak. Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley has the story.
It's 8 months into the COVID-19 pandemic, and Ontario has a new way to communicate public health restrictions. It means no more Stage 1, Stage 2, or Stage 3. Instead, it's green, yellow, orange, red, or lockdown. Ontario's new categories for COVID-19 measures in each public health unit.
An early warning system with clear criteria to help inform when restrictions should be tightened or loosened on a regional basis.
When the system takes effect this weekend, most regions will be in green or yellow, with largely the same measures as they've faced since June. Peel, York, Ottawa, and the Eastern Ontario Health Unit are set to be classed as orange. Toronto becomes an orange zone November 14th and keeps its current restrictions until then.
We need everyone to recognize that risks remain, especially in crowded places, in enclosed spaces, and where there is close contact.
In the orange zones, indoor drinking and dining will be permitted in bars and restaurants. Last call is moved up to 9 p.m., and the maximum number at a table is 4. It means the province is loosening restrictions in the hot zones, even though today's count of new cases hit a record high.
We look at the numbers, there are some positive areas. We see a little bit of a flattening.
A month ago, my sources told me the province was considering a color-coded system for COVID-19 alerts. When I asked Premier Ford about it at the time, he said it would be too confusing for the public.
Regions would not move into the red zone unless their weekly case numbers shoot higher and test positivity rates exceed 10%. Some doctors think those thresholds are set too high.
If you're really persistently, a whole region is greater than 10%, there is a big problem there.
With the metrics as they are now, that would allow for pretty significant spread in a community before measures are imposed.
The framework that was released by the government today sets the stage for ongoing spread of COVID-19, future lockdowns, lack of economic recovery, and unnecessary illness and death.
Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
In addition to the new framework, the province announced that regions that had been in a modified stage 2 will now be moved into the orange category. That means restaurants and gyms can reopen, but as Greg Ross explains, Toronto business owners are going to have to wait just a little bit longer.
I could open up right now. Steve Lachelt is chomping at the bit to reopen his downtown gym, Cardio Go. But unlike his counterparts in Ottawa, Peel, and York, he'll have to wait at least an additional week before he can start allowing customers back in. It's getting more and more critical as every day passes. It's been really tough, and the more we open and close, the longer this goes on, the less faith people have that we're relevant. According to Premier Doug Ford, the decision to keep businesses closed came from Toronto Mayor John Tory.
And we were ready to open October 1st. And then
that works for Anita Mancuso, who owns Sotto Voce Italian restaurant on College Street. She needs the extra time to get organized and to restock her kitchen.
I needed it because we slowed everything down.
Just before restaurants in Toronto shut down for the second time, Mancuso took out a lease on this vacant restaurant next door. It gave her an additional 2,800 square feet to keep her customers physically distanced, but it also tripled her rent.
I know it's a huge gamble. I think most people thought I was insane.
A gamble that so far hasn't paid off, but now she's hoping it will, although she wasn't anticipating some new restrictions that are going to make it tough.
I don't get 9 o'clock because nobody goes out for dinner in the city really, really early.
Under the province's new framework, last call to serve alcohol is now 9 p.m. It was 11 o'clock under the old restrictions.
Now you're limiting those restaurants that could have done 2 seatings, completely safe, to now 1 seating. It's what you survive on. The food is great, but it enhances the alcohol sales.
Restaurants will also see the size of groups they can serve shrink from 6 under the old guidelines to 4 under the new ones. Mancuso says it's not ideal, but she's going to have to live with it.
Because I would rather go down fighting than just put my hands up and say we give in.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette, as we look at some of these restaurants fighting for survival, some good news with patio weather coming for them for a few days anyway?
Yes, it's like a gift, and it's a gift that's going to last for a week. So lots of opportunities. I know the sun's setting earlier, but still, there'll be some warmth into those evening hours and certainly during the day for those patios. Current temperatures, well, we're sitting here 4 or 5 degrees, 3 degrees right now in Oshawa. It's because we're waiting for something, not just election results. We're waiting for the winds to shift as well with our weather, and then things will be heating up in this regard. So we still have an east to, in some cases, southeasterly wind, and we're going to find those winds are going to be changing around to the south to southwest, and as they do, they're going to become gusty, so they'll just begin to pick up overnight tonight as they shift. It will be breezy through the day tomorrow, and not just tomorrow, but into tomorrow night and into Thursday as well. So some of those winds, especially for the Niagara region, will be quite strong, at times over 50, maybe even 60 kilometers an hour, but it's going to help to push those temperatures up, and I mean way up. As the warm front is passing by, then a few flurries, most of those well to the east and not even reaching the ground, kind of drying up before they even get here. Our temperature nearly steady as we go into the evening hours. We're going to see the skies clearing, and then as we go through the overnight towards morning, we're actually going to find the temperature coming up again. So those temperatures rising towards morning with that southwesterly breeze. By tomorrow afternoon, way above seasonal, 16 degrees. Yes, a little breezy, but some perfect patio conditions and sticking around. I'll talk about that some more. I'd love to talk about it more, so I will coming up, Dwight.
We all would. Thank you for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
When we come back, why one woman says the man she hired put the con in contractor.
It's heartbreaking because I started this project to try and preserve the cottage for future generations. I'm angry as hell.
She paid a contractor $64,000 to save her cottage. He left it on the brink of collapse. That investigation next. A contractor who went to jail for defrauding an elderly woman out of her life savings is once again being accused of bilking people. Some Muskoka cottagers say Scott Eisman has taken tens of thousands of dollars from them without doing the work he promised. Police are now involved. John Lancaster has more in the CBC News Toronto exclusive.
For almost 5 months, Liz Saunders' cottage has been perched precariously on blocks.
How do I get it back down? There's no more money.
The contractor she paid to lift the cottage, build a new foundation, and ease it back down again fled, she says, along with the $64,000 she paid him.
It's heartbreaking because I started this project to try and preserve the cottage for future generations. I'm angry as hell.
Saunders says she was misled about the man who owned the company called Cottage Life Construction. She recently found out his name is Scotty Eisman, a convicted fraudster who was sent to prison for 2 years in 2014.
I Googled him and found that he had defrauded a 92 or 93-year-old blind woman out of $138,000, and I was gobsmacked. And I thought, you scumbag.
Ontario Provincial Police say they're aware of the growing list of complaints facing Eisman and his company. They say 4 separate Cottage Country area police detachments are investigating.
He just kept delaying and delaying and delaying, and he never actually started work at all.
Renee Langevin says in all he paid Cottage Life Construction $14,000 to renovate a washroom at his Parry Sound cottage. He said he got plenty of excuses.
Ranging from his wife got vertigo or girlfriend got vertigo. There was an emergency because somebody's roof had collapsed. He's basically a master of excuses, I would say.
Langevin says Eisman didn't use his real name in the contract he signed. Cottage Life Construction is now bankrupt, but the damage to owners like Saunders remains. She hopes the cottage she's been coming to all her life doesn't collapse this winter.
I would be heartbroken. Absolutely heartbroken.
Even if it does survive, she says, the money to fix it is long gone. John Lancaster, CBC News, Bracebridge.
You are looking live at What's Up for Grabs tonight, the White House. We have more on tonight's crucial presidential election when we come back. On a day when Ontario hit the most cases ever for COVID-19, the Premier announced a plan to lift restrictions in the hardest hit areas. That's as testing is way below right now the provincial target. It leaves some doctors wondering how safe the province's plan really is. Lorinda Redekop explains.
Ontario hit a record 1,050 new daily cases. Toronto recorded the most with 408. Of the other regions with restrictions, Peel reported 212 cases, 76 in York, and 34 in Ottawa. The Premier says other than Toronto, the restrictions will be eased this weekend. Under the new system, they'll be classified as orange or a restrict level.
This means gyms and indoor dining will be open with the capacity limits and restricted hours. Mayor Tory has asked us for a little more time in Toronto.
It'll be an extra week of restrictions in Toronto. Striking a balance between public health and business is something many governments are dealing with.
There we go!
In Ford's case, his slogan has been open for business, and the business community is looking for help.
And is pushing as much as possible to reopen as quickly as it can. And so he's trying to find a balance between these two forces that will make everybody happy, but it'll be difficult to see whether or not he can pull that off.
The government announced these changes to restrictions as just over 25,000 COVID-19 tests were performed, way fewer than the target of 50,000.
We cannot become numb to 1,000 new cases and 10 to 20 people dying each day.
This doctor works with people from low-income communities and says some Toronto neighborhoods have had test positivity rates of over 14%. He'd like to see more investment in testing, tracing, and isolating contacts of people who test positive.
That happy balance, quote unquote, that we're hearing about, we're striking a real ethical balance that is really tipping in one way, tipping towards people of privilege, people with higher income, people with housing, people with support.
He says it's people without that privilege who are most at risk. Another statistic from today, 14 people died from the virus. Lorinda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Staff at Glamorgan Junior Public School in Scarborough were back in class this afternoon after refusing to enter this morning. There have been 12 confirmed cases of COVID-19 at the school. A Ministry of Labour investigation deemed the school is safe. The union representing education workers says it will appeal the ministry's findings.
As it stands right now, it seems the ministry has instructed our members that it's safe to return into the school. We have some major issue with that. Some of it's to do with Toronto Public Health. We think these are school-based, maybe school-based as opposed to community-based, and the board is blaming public health, and the ministry is blaming public health. And we want public health to come out and say what's going on at these schools and multiple schools across the system. Are they community-based or are they school-based?
According to the union, one of their infected members has been in the ICU for about a week. The TDSB says the 12 confirmed cases are self-isolating along with 58 other students. Polls have now closed in 2 states, Kentucky and Indiana, as America decides who will be president for the next 4 years. You're looking live at a polling station in Bangor, Maine. Polls close there at 8. After what has been a long and bitter campaign between rivals Donald Trump and Joe Biden, it is Election Day in the USA. Despite record voter turnout, the path to victory for either candidate may not be straight or easy. Rafi Boudjikanian has more.
Mr. Vice President, can you tell us why you're spending so much time in Pennsylvania today?
One last push of campaigning on the big day. Joe Biden subdued after a late night with a celebrity endorsement.
Right now it's time for action.
Visiting his childhood home in Pennsylvania, while Donald Trump turned up on Fox and Friends to boast.
We think we're winning Texas very big. We think we're winning Florida very big.
But at this point, it's all in the hands of voters and the Electoral College, and it comes down to a handful of battleground states, such as Florida.
This is my first time voting, actually, so I'm actually really excited.
The state holds 29 of those all-important Electoral College votes, all snatched up by Trump 4 years ago, the First Lady there today making the case to keep the Sunshine State red.
It's election day, so I wanted to come here to vote.
But besides campaigning and stump speeches, there are concerns about violence, cities boarding up, the White House too. The FBI is involved, investigating this incident of Trump supporters running a Biden campaign bus off the road last week in Texas. It's all trickled down to worries even in states that aren't along the voter battleground.
It just seems like there's so much hate in the country right now.
With COVID, a lot of people were afraid to come in, so I guess the courts just said, you have to do it, you have to let these votes be counted.
Close to 100 million Americans have already cast their ballots. Because of the pandemic, several states are allowed to count mail-in ballots for several days after polls officially close. And there is another reason the country could stay in suspense beyond tonight. Republicans have already challenged mail-in ballots in several jurisdictions in court, and the president has said that's very well where he may return if he doesn't like the results tonight. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Garrisonville, Virginia.
You can watch the votes roll in live all night. Head to cbcnews.ca to find out interactive state-by-state results. U.S. weather experts call Hurricane Eta an extremely dangerous storm, bringing catastrophic winds to parts of Central America. By midday today, the system had begun to do its damage. The wind started whipping up overnight and by morning filled some Honduran beaches with debris. Residents who already live with next to nothing try to protect their homes made of cardboard and plastic. Many fear having their belongings stolen if they leave. Rivers have burst their banks, flooding towns and generating mudslides that claimed the life of a 13-year-old girl in Honduras. Evacuations began yesterday in Nicaragua. Forecasters say once the hurricane hits mountainous terrain, it should quickly weaken. And that is the hope, call it.
Yeah, this is just an incredible season. We know that. We've been talking about it all the way through. It doesn't end till we get to the end of this month, but this is one of the strongest storms we've actually seen in the month of November. So a Category 4 as it was making landfall here into Nicaragua, moving towards Honduras. So yes, they're talking about flash flooding, river flooding, and also landslides as it gets into the higher terrains. So a major hurricane, catastrophic conditions here. Hopefully the interaction is going to weaken it. But then the question is going to be, is this going to be another storm that's going to move towards the Gulf? Well, all these spaghetti plots you see here, these are the different models trying to determine what's going to happen. So over the next week, the potential for it to be coming up towards the Gulf, yes, it is there. So that's something we'll be watching for you there with that storm. All right, winds obviously with that. Winds back at home playing a role in what's going to be happening for us here. Right now, basically coming kind of from the east to southeast, but these winds are going to be changing direction, moving around to the southwest as a warm front is moving in, and that's going to be pushing our temperatures up. And as we move into this new air mass, we're going to be finding this actually sticking around for several days where our temperatures are going to be way above seasonal. So yes, it is going to be breezy, especially as we get into tomorrow afternoon, especially around the Niagara region. Some of that warmer air already back into southwestern Ontario. As that warm front moves through, we'll actually find the temperatures coming up overnight tonight towards morning. Some of those flurries over there towards eastern Ontario, not even necessarily all cases making its way towards the ground there. So temps tonight coming up. Tomorrow morning, pretty quickly, we're actually going to find our temperatures going into the double digits. We're clearing tonight. We'll have sunshine tomorrow once the sun is up. By tomorrow afternoon, here's your seasonal high. This is where our temperatures are going to be, and this is where they're going to be over the next several days. And check out the daytime lows, the overnight lows. They're actually more like the seasonal daytime highs for this time of year. So is it unusual in November? Maybe for a day or two, that's not unusual, but for a whole week, that is unusual. But Dwight, this is 2020, so here you go.
Right, Colette?
It's not all
correct.
bad.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As you've been hearing all show, one of the states that pollsters believe is in play is Florida. Donald Trump narrowly won there in 2016, and it's on his team's must-win list again. Florida has 29 electoral college votes, and Democrats have been courting it heavily in the waning days of this campaign. Katie Simpson now is in Miami.
We are at a fire station that has become a polling center. Let me take a step out of the way and we'll show you. This is about as busy as it's been so far today. We haven't seen those huge lines that you are seeing in other states, but people are here casting their ballots. And then if we take a look over to the other part of the fire hall, you can see everyone is wearing a mask, people are keeping their distance, and people have hand sanitizer. This is what voting looks like in the age of physical distancing and social distancing. So it hasn't necessarily been busy at this particular polling station today so far. That could change as the day goes, but we do know Floridians have been engaging in this election through those early voting methods, whether it's mail-in voting or early in voting person. Nearly 9 million Floridians have already cast a ballot before the polls open today. That's well over half of all registered voters in this state. Now, we spoke with a gentleman who cast his ballot today. He told us he wanted to wait until today to make up his mind. He's one of those few undecided voters left. Now, he wouldn't tell us who he voted for, but he told us that he is really concerned about what's going on with the pandemic. He's a small business owner, he owns a jet ski company, and he really depends on tourism. And he's worried if the pandemic does not get under control and if there's not some leadership from the White House on how to move forward on that, he is greatly concerned for his own livelihood.
Florida needs to see, some closure. If not, all this is gonna lead to nothing. Nobody's gonna want to come to South Florida eventually. Nobody's like, if the pandemic just keeps going and people just keep going about their days, it's gonna be a sad world,
Florida is averaging about 4,000 new cases, COVID cases every day. It's a far cry from the peak back in the summer in July, where the state had more than 15,000 new cases in one day alone. So that is a significant concern on the minds of voters here. This is a very incredibly important state in this race. As you mentioned, 29 electoral college votes up for grabs. It's only happened 2 times since the 1960, where the candidate won Florida and did not go on to win the presidency. So only twice. John F. Kennedy, back in the 1960s, he beat Richard Nixon. He did not win Florida, but was still able to capture the White House. And then we saw it in 1992. Bill Clinton did not win Florida, but still went on to win the White House. So typically, if we take a look at history as an example, whoever wins Florida typically goes on to win the White House. It's a huge prize in the Electoral College. Now, Florida has started calculating and tabulating its early votes since October 15th. It's one of the few states that does that. So when the polls close at 7 o'clock tonight, there are going to be a surge of early results because, of course, they've been collecting and tabulating those votes since October 15th. We spoke with someone from the Miami-Dade Elections Department about what has been going on behind the scenes. He says even though those votes are being tabulated and calculated, they don't have any sort of idea just yet who might be in the lead.
We don't see the cumulative results until election night. Think of these tabulation machines as a big calculator. It gets added every day starting since October 15th, and on election night then we hit the equal sign, and that's when you see the results.
So when they hit that equal sign, they'll start to see results. They could come in between 7 and 7:30 for those mail-in ballots as well as those early in-person ballots. Those numbers anytime between 7, 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then when the polls close here at 7 o'clock, expect the traditional counting to go on while you have those in-person on election day votes start to be counted.
Texas is a winner-take-all situation. Whoever wins the most votes statewide wins its electors with 38 electoral college votes. It is the second richest prize in the country behind California's 55. Now, despite that, the state does not often see a lot of campaigning. That's in part because of its large size and because, with a few exceptions, it has reliably gone Republican going back to the 1970s. But this time around, the Lone Star State is looking much less predictable.
Hoping for a Biden victory and a better course for America.
I'm really believing for a landslide for President Trump, not just for the popular vote, but for the electoral vote as well.
And I don't understand about the rest of the Republicans. They know they got a president that's doing wrong. And it's time for a change.
For the first time in decades, the state might flip. That hinges on the turnout amongst Hispanic and suburban voters. That has a lot of Texans nervous about the outcome. David Carmen is outside a voting station in Houston.
It's closer perhaps than it's been in many, many decades. 44 years the last time this state has gone for a Democratic presidential candidate. You see over here, Trump supporters out in front of what is a ballot station. If we come just over to here, you see just how many campaign signs are out inside there, many Democratic supporters who are really working people the last minute sort of push to try to get voters who are coming in here today. Fascinating case here in Texas. 9.6 million people actually voted in advance, nearly 10 million. There could be somewhere in the order of 1 to 2 million more voting today. Let's put this into perspective. 1 out of every 10 advance votes cast across this entire country has happened right here in Texas. And this is a state that is known for its low voter turnout. That's transformed completely in 2020, far more people coming out, and that has meant that the state is now being called by many pollsters a toss-up, something that was unfathomable in years past. You see and hear lots of support going on, Trump supporters driving by, waving at the Trump supporters across the street. This is an open carry state, so a number of the people over there are openly armed, but that's not an unusual thing to see necessarily in Texas. You do get the sense, though, that this is the division in action that we see in this country, the two sides really staking it out politically today. What if we get to the end of tonight or tomorrow, because it could take some time to get results, what if we don't have a decisive result? What if people question the way in which that result came about, that there are allegations already of voter fraud, that coming largely from the Trump campaign? We're hearing allegations of voter suppression, those allegations coming from the Biden, the Democratic side. And if that continues, if there continues to be dispute over the vote itself, there is concern about perhaps violence, more civil unrest going into the days, perhaps the weeks following this election. That's why you're seeing across this country many stores that are boarding up, National Guards being put on alert in many states. Just general anxiety, concern about what comes next. And we're hearing that from both sides.
I'm Ismaila Alpha, host of Metro Morning. Well, coming up on tomorrow's program, we have everything you need to navigate the results of the American election. We're also going to get your reaction to the results of the U.S. election, so join me from 5:30 till 8:30 on CBC Radio 1.
You are looking live at a polling station in Philadelphia. Polls in Pennsylvania close at 8 p.m. Philly officials have already warned voters it could take days to count all their mail-in ballots. It's going to be a long night tonight, Colette, but we're going to be talking about this for a while now.
Oh, to have that crystal ball, right, Dwight? I kind of have one for the weather. It's called my forecast. So let's go with that, shall we? Overnight tonight, we will find the temperature rising as we head towards morning, okay? So pretty quickly, once the sun is up, the temperature is going to be headed into those double digits. The winds will pick up from the southwest. They're going to be pretty gusty as we go into the afternoon, but with sunshine, 16 degrees. And this warmer air, as I've been talking about, it's going to be sticking around for a while. We're going to be into this pattern. So the daytime highs are going to be well above seasonal, and the overnight lows are going to be well above seasonal. And yes, we were talking about earlier, Dwight and I, about for patios, you'll be able to get out there and enjoy yourself. Even though the sun sets a little bit earlier, the temperatures will actually be kind of comfortable, that it'll be nice weather. So this is a welcome treat in that regard, Dwight.
It really is, and I'm going to slow my roll on the winter tires.
Yeah, you could do that too.
Not anymore. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Remember, CBC has you covered on all our platforms on what could be a long presidential election tonight. The Nationals' Adrian Arsenault, Andrew Chang, and Ian Hanamansik have everything you need on CBC television starting at 8 p.m. tonight.